So it's
What were,
really,
what were you recording before?
music as service.
Yeah.
It was a really good discussion, and hopefully it works when I
Yeah.
do it again for this one.
Well,
Help,
we,
holler.
yeah, and thank you for at least probably if you just if there's questions that's or something that pops up in the chat, I'll try to keep an eye on it too.
Okay, no problem.
So
I see Christina again.
yep. And Christine, I'll be there tomorrow morning at 9. So I don't know if you got my email response.
It's probably in my email. I did get everything recovered, and so I've got several Gmails, including the West Kingdom one. So it should work. Yeah, but good. Yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm. And I started working on my resume. It's kind of like, all right, when did I do those things? It's been a while.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be real detailed. I just need to send something on up to.
I'll have that ready.
Ariana.
It's well underway, but yeah, it's like, wow.
So I know.
Mm.
Do most folks have a 3-day weekend or?
No.
Yeah.
What our campus does is it combines all the movable holidays that they can observe, except for like Labor Day and Memorial Day and Cesar Chavez and Veterans. They put them all at the week after Christmas, so they close the campus for the week after Christmas. So we get kind of like a 10-day break usually, from whenever where Christmas falls. And so, yeah. So no.
I hear birds.
We have parakeets. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. No, I love it. Well, I have a bird feeder outside the window. I like hearing the birds.
We have, yeah, I've got some outside bird feeders. Working at home, it allows you a little bit more time. And my son called me like in August, said, "Mom, would you like some birds?" And I was like, yeah, I guess. He says, "I'll bring a cage and everything." So he had adopted these from a friend who had to move and didn't have a home for them. So decades ago, I'd had parakeets, and I forgot how interesting they were. They're very smart birds, but they've been entertaining. And I sit up on this side of the house, and it's a little lonely. So it's nice to hear that little chirpy sound until they start squawking, and then you have to put everything on mute.
So, well, I don't know. I don't know how accurate my clock is, but it says 4:10, and I want to try to honor time because there's lots of moving parts and pieces here. That I think Elsie has done an excellent job at getting together. I don't know if we'll have more folks joining us shortly, but I'll just start with an introduction to myself. I'm Mistress Claire Elena de Montfort. I live in Awertha, and I've only played in the society in Awertha, although I did travel frequently down to the West Kingdom to do equestrian activities or attend events. Oh, and there is my good friend, Cunehild. Hi, Cunehild.
I am bouncing through the wrong rooms. I'm sorry.
Oh. She is a former protege of mine, and I'm now her apprentice. So that's always a fun topic of discussion. I have held a variety of offices in different. I've been an exchequer. I've been a seneschal. Arts and Sciences officer at one point. And the last 3 years, I've been the Kingdom Chronicler, thanks to Fee saying, "Hey, are you interested in this?" And I was like, I think that's one kingdom job that can be done from Awertha without a whole lot of trouble. And it's been an interesting ride. I've learned a lot. And so it's and the new Kingdom Chronicler, tap, is Christina. We've got to figure out a changeover date with all these virtual things. So she'll be the one that's bugging everybody. I want to give a thank you to Her Grace Helga. As I was working on questions to help with this roundtable discussion about service, all of a sudden on her Facebook feed, she started the SCA question, ask a friend. And I don't know how many of you are friends with Araya on Facebook, but those questions were very similar to ones that I'd already started writing down. And she was much more eloquent in wording them than I was. So I said, hey, can I just like yonk your questions and use those? And some of the ones that I had that weren't on there. So I'm looking forward to this. I was protege to Mistress Sorsha Karaman. I don't know how many of you know her. We lost her to cancer in June last year. And what prompted me to reach out to Elsie and say I like this were the many discussions that Sorsha and I had about once a month. And she was very good at guiding me through thinking about what does it mean to be service? What does it mean to be a peer? And making me really take a look at what I wanted my journey to be. So with that introduction, the first question I want to toss out, and if we're a small enough group, if folks want to unmute and mute or however, this is a participatory session. I want you, what is your definition of service? What is a definition when you say, what does it mean to be of service?
Should have done my homework.
Well, sometimes just an off the cuff. Yes. Nest, did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
From Ethelmark. Wow, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having this.
Yeah.
One of my household mottos is service is love made visible.
Oh, that's nice.
So it's service to others and showing your care for them, but it also encompasses service to yourself and taking care of yourself as well, because you can't pour from an empty glass.
That is true. That is true. Other
I bet
thoughts?
some of us have tried to do that, though.
Oh yeah, been there.
I
That's
think we've
why
all
she
been
has
there,
that
done
motto.
that. Yeah. Had to take a break sometimes. Any other thoughts?
I've never really had to, or I've never really considered the actual meaning of service outside of, I want this thing to keep running. I want this thing that I enjoy to keep working. So I am going to do what I need to do to make that happen. It's less of a definition and more of a philosophy, I guess.
Yep.
For me.
I think one of the things that Sorsha and I often talked about was, and I have this question later, it's service in some respects is a two-headed coin. Like you said, Reese, you want to keep this continuing, so you do what you need to do to keep it continuing. But at the same time, there's also this sort of attachment to the philosophy of service that we shouldn't be noticed for serving, that it needs to almost be a sacrificial sort of thing. And I'm not quite sure where that came from. Some really good advice that I got and that I use to talk with a protege about, or even to talk with someone that you see doing a lot of service is, if what you are doing is going to be missed, if you're not there and no one else is doing it, then that is probably something that's important. And I think that helped me kind of take a look at what I was doing. And if you're doing something just for the sake of being noticed, I would argue that if you don't do it, it's not really going to be missed because you're just looking for something that to be noticed. And Reese, I'm going to use you as an example because in your role as web minister, when I had to reach out to you so many times, when I had questions or we needed to discuss something that wasn't working, if you hadn't been there, you would have been missed. What you were doing made a difference. And I think that is kind of what I look at when I'm evaluating service. Any other thoughts?
That's a good observation. I volunteer because I might see a need or helping things move more smoothly, whether or not it's visible or not. Clearly, chronicler offices are noticed if they're not done, kind of like housework. But being recognized for doing those things seems secondary to doing them, because the desire just to help out.
Mhm. So all of you are probably here. Are there any other peers here? Any other Pelicans in this group? Okay. Tracy, I know that's probably not your SEA name, but that's what's showing up as your display name. Nest, who I saw another
That's-
hand. Oh, Alice.
correct.
Yes, yeah. And
Really.
Ellie. So any thoughts from you as Pelicans about a philosophy of service, or thinking about service if you have a protege, or even people that you just talked to?
I do have proteges, and some of them I'm more interactive with because I see them on a very often. Even have had a chance to see some of them during the pandemic. We meet in parking lots and have coffee, talking from car to car. We can do that when it's not 1 degree, you know.
Mhm.
And some of them are need to chat. They need to talk. It is what I'm doing matters. And if I'm the one that needs to tell them that, yes, what you're doing matters, then that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. And then some of them are very self-sufficient and do what they do because they love the process. One of them is very active in the archery community, and he works hard to make sure everybody can have a good time. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a good way to approach service. If what you're doing allows other people to enjoy the game, however you define the game, then you're performing service.
Many of you know Mari Alexander, and when I was sitting my vigil, she was there, and I remember her saying to me, the Pelican is the person that makes sure everybody is having a good time. You know, that people, they leave an event or leave something having had a good time because someone took the effort to either even ask their name or introduce themselves or introduce them to somebody else. They're kind of the social butterfly of the party, but not the
Social facilitator.
Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. So that's a good thing. So I have, sometimes Laurel, it's very obvious about being a peer because you got an art or a science or something that has a physical thing that can be considered, and you're elevated for your gift in that. Service is one of those nebulous things, like, should I really get a peerage for doing what just needs to be done? And I see you nodding your head, Alistair. So here's the question. What's the difference between, and this was a question that Helga asked on our Facebook page, what's the difference between wanting the cookie, the peerage, and seeking peerage through actions and behaviors?
Well, actions and behaviors, they're the things that count. Wanting isn't what counts. It's what you do and how you do it. Don't be the person who commits service as opposed to performs it or shares it.
And I think we've all known a peer that got their peerage and then evaporated off the face of the planet. And some of it, there were real reasons, but then others, it's like, where did they go? Alistair, I saw you look like you were about to interject a comment.
I think because I'm very much on doing. If I see something that needs to be done, I just do it. And I'm the West Kingdom list mistress, and
Yeah.
I did it a lot. It was something that I really enjoyed doing. So I got hooked in with the list people, and then eventually I got West Kingdom list, and then got rid of it, and then got it back again. That's a whole nother story. But it was something that 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 was the passion that I saw. It wasn't that, hey, let's go get this cookie, because if I hold a kingdom office, I will get a period. And it was more of, I wanted to do this. And when I got offered the peerage, I'm like, but I don't know if I did enough. And I think that's a lot of the things that it's like, well, thanks, but you know, I'm still learning and still working on this.
But I think what you just said is what I think for me personally is at the root of that service philosophy. It's like you said, when you got your period, you're like, well, I was just doing what I love doing. And I think that's a key component of this service philosophy. You know, you see something needs to be done, you love doing it, you jump in, you do it, you share that enthusiasm with other people or guide other people. I think one of the joys that I get is being able to kind of push someone out of their comfort zone and be there, but then step back and just watch it happen. And they don't even really notice that they're doing a thing. You know, I think that's an important part of it.
I have a question on the from the Pelicans who are here. Were you a protege before you became a Pelican?
Yes, I was.
I wasn't.
I was.
And yeah, I don't, my
I
protege
was, and actually, I think it was not the best thing to do. But
Yeah.
but mine is probably a unique story, and it was at least a decade and a half after I ended the protege relationship when I became a Pelican. Which, by the way, today's my 10th anniversary.
Yay!
Oh, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So,
I'll shut up now.
my
People
protege
thought I was one already. They just thought I didn't go to meetings.
yeah, yeah. Elsie, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I think one of the things, I was not protege to anybody. I think one of the key differences, to get to your question on what's the difference between the wanting and the doing and the learning, I think it's actually a franchise. And I think Christina's comment ties back into that. When the populace starts to look at you and assume that you are a Pelican because of how you approach what you're doing, not just because you work yourself to death or you burn yourself out, but you actually take service and you elevate it, I think that shows in all your actions. And that's what gets you past that gray area that sometimes folks are concerned of. And it's sort of that hardest last step to take.
Mm-hmm. Reese, you had your hand up too.
Yes. So I know this can be an unpopular opinion. For myself, I think it's totally okay to want the cookie, because the way that I approach it is that this is, before I get elevated, this is my education. I have to keep working and working and working to get that doctorate. And then after I get that doctorate, guess what? That's when the real work starts.
Yep.
So wanting the cookie or wanting the doctorate, I think, is all right. I mean, you can't make that your end goal, because that's definitely not what it's about. But that is definitely you having, for lack of a better term, the ambition to get there and then continue the real work afterwards, and making sure that you're taking on the students that you can help thrive in our society and help keep our society alive.
Ely?
Ailey.
Okay, thank you.
I think that there is a difference, that a perception, a difference, a perceived difference. It is totally okay for a fighter to really, really, really want to be a knight. And it's okay for an artist to really, really, really want to be a Laurel. But there's a perception, and I've seen it in my kingdom, that it's not okay to want to be a Pelican because you should just want to do service. You shouldn't want the cookie. It sort of goes in waves, but nobody ever looks at a fighter askance if they say, oh, when I grow up, I want to be a knight, nobody thinks anything but, yes, that's a good goal. And an artist wants to be better and wants to be recognized. Everybody thinks, yes, that's fine. But there's a certain number of people who think that wanting to be recognized for service it's just not a good thing.
Yes. Bea, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, so just
Christine.
to add on to what Reese was saying, like the way I look at it is not wanting a cookie so much as, you know, I think of it as I'm training for a job, you know, and maybe I will never get that particular job, but I still am gaining skills along the way that maybe it'll put me into a different job, maybe it'll help me, you know, somewhere else. But it's still exactly like going for that doctorate, you know, it's not so much that I am going for an award, because I don't think it is an award, it's a job.
Christina. And then Elsie.
Sometimes that road to receiving this recognition or honor, however you want to receive it, is, at least for me, it was several years past when I had after I'd stepped down as Kingdom Chronicler for the second time. And at that time, I ended up being that peer that kind of flew off the radar because my husband was critically ill. And so the timing was really poor. So I think the folks that knew me knew what was going on, but the people who knew that I had done this job and got this award and then I disappeared may have judged those actions as, well, she just got this, where did she go? And it was like, you know, when you have somebody who's dying, you really don't have time to focus on this. And so I don't know what to do. You know, when you look at that, the greater picture is you have to, I don't know why I said that. It's just, I was that peer that disappeared and I have never had a protege. I wouldn't even know what to tell anybody. Because I wasn't one. I just was a service-oriented person who enjoyed doing it.
Yeah. Oh, were you done, Christina? Elsie?
I think one of the things that we struggle with as an order, we tend to be an older group. We tend to be inexperienced. Often it's, you know, I got mine really fast. We often, and then because of that, we are sometimes resistant to change, including how we speak about our language and the it's not okay to want. And I think the wanting and the it's okay to be a fighter but not okay to be a protege, I think some of that's changing, but I think it's more recent, and it's one of the important things for us as members of an order to look at what the current state is. Maybe not what we used to think it was, and if we still believe that, by all means, but I do think we need to actually look at how we speak to the unfeathers out there so that we don't accidentally crush hopes when maybe things have changed.
Tracy, it just says Tracy on my screen, so I apologize, but I see your hand is up also.
Yes, and I apologize. I don't know. I've tried to figure out how to change my iPhone name to my SCA name, and I've been unsuccessful. Anyway, I just want to express condolences to our colleague here in the group about the loss of her husband, and basically just agree with what the Pelican who just spoke said. Also, I think it is about changing language, and it is about changing hearts and minds through how you express yourself with what you say and what you do. So I don't know if I could improve upon what she said. So that's what I was going to say.
Yeah. And thank you all, because that was a question I had down, and we circled to that, is how do we as peers better articulate this concept of seeking a peerage, and that it's okay, like Risa said, to want the cookie, and he said, you know, I'm working on a job. But I think, and I agree with Elsie, I think it's changing, that we're seeing when people get joy out of doing something, let's recognize that joy and build that up, because that makes it all of us much better.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
and it, as with anything in the SEA, it starts at the grassroots level. It has to start with your local group, at your fighter practice, or at the business meeting, or in any Zoom gatherings that you have. You know, talking with the people that you associate with, and then making those new friends. Hopefully, they're new members down the line, but just letting them know that whatever it is that you find joy in doing in the SCA, it's okay to set goals, because life is about setting goals and having aspirations. And if you don't do that, you know, one of my favorite sayings, and I know it can sound trite, but if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So
I'm a middle school teacher, and sometimes my students are like in a panic, and there's an assignment due and they haven't done all the parts and pieces, and I'll look at them and say, a lack of planning on your part does not create an emergency on my part. So and I've been just as guilty of that too. So Genevieve, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah. Hi, I've met you before, hanging out with Marguerite.
Yes. Yes.
So I have a question. Since this is a philosophy of service, and I'm a very old Laurel, and like the pandemic has really taught me that I really want to help more, but I don't want to be a Pelican. I don't have that kind of bandwidth. And then I hear stories like on Between Two Peers about there are kingdoms where when the royal pavilion rolls up, everybody gets up and helps make it happen. And it really makes me wonder about, particularly here in the West Kingdom, just how do we foster a culture of volunteerism? Because I got to tell you, my personal perception is, and this could be wrong, is that there's this weird expectation where if you do any service, they probably want to be a Pelican. So they really need to be dedicated enough to pierce their breasts to give blood, as opposed to when the Royal Pavilion shows up, everybody gets up to help. So yeah, it's that question of many hands, fostering a culture of many hands make like work without having to say, oh yeah, I'm dedicated to becoming a Pelican. So that was, since it was the philosophy of service, I was kind of interested in that kind of discussion. So just throwing that out there.
Yeah. Telenor?
September 2019, I broke my collarbone 3 weeks before October Crown, when I had to set up the Arts and Sciences Pavilion for the West Kingdom to run Wreath of Athena. Do you think I set up the Arts and Sciences Pavilion? I stood on the corner of the Eric and said, hey, I need help. And like 20 people came rushing in. It was just an absolute joy to see. So I think it's there. I don't know how we can foster a sense of it, other than to say that, hey, come help is needed and everybody's welcome to come and help. I don't know.
Thanking people helps.
I think getting back to what Genevieve said is sometimes we need to set the example. Sometimes people are afraid to help because they don't know that the help is needed. And I'm the person, I'm like, I'll walk up and say, what can I do? Do I need to do something? And so I think if we can help set that example, or as Telenor mentioned, hey, I need you over here. Can someone come, whatever. Or that newcomer that you just met when you were signing in at gate, who's looking kind of lost, invite them to say, hey, we need to do this. Like when I started playing, I was in the kitchen all the time, because washing dishes or helping with cooking, because that you seem to meet everybody when you were in the kitchen. So, finding those things, Elsie mentioned earlier that we are, the Pelicans seem to be the older people in the crowd, and we need to reach out to those younger folks who, I'm 60 years old. I grew up with a different, framework for my life that today's 20-year-olds or 30 years old don't have. So I think finding that common ground between those two viewpoints and helping guide people in understanding what that means. Elsie?
So I'm dropping a link in the chat. I took a class at a leadership symposium 14 years ago now. It was an AVMA leadership symposium. And it was taught by the executive director of the Association of Executive Directors. So it's kind of the seneschal of the Association of Seneschals. And it was on invigorating membership. He had a 12-point thing, and that's the link I just dropped in there. Actually, Claire or Christina, it's free for republishing in newsletters. Just make sure you include his information, is what we were told. It is the single best list on how you encourage service and how you build a healthy service community that I've ever come across. And I grew up really being raised to be a Pelican. And I still find this constantly, that I go back to this list on the things that are in there. One of the biggest things that I think we do poorly is we tend to, the number 8, where it talks about use their talent, not just their time. That's actually probably one of the places we stumble most often, particularly with newcomers. We don't always take a moment. We're like, oh, you're new, you go do this newcomer job. We don't always take the time to find out what it is, what talents they have, and maybe what excites them, and that sort of thing.
Christine, I think you had your hand up also.
Yeah, we were in an earlier discussion with the John Bear Killers, and I post, how do you get people, younger people to volunteer? And we have a lot of competition for time and attention due to video games and no money and transportation issues and things like that. So it just kind of hit on something just that I'd heard earlier today.
Reese.
Well, in direct response to that, what I've always told people is that we have to learn how to gamify the system. There's so not just with wanting the cookie or aspiring to be a Pelican, but there's also the stigma of being an award chaser. How do I get this award? What can I do to get this particular award? I look at them as achievements. They're game achievements. I have have achieved this particular portion of the game. Now I can continue on and strive for the next achievement, and strive for the next achievement, and strive for the next achievement. That's kind of how I think you have to do it with the younger generation, the generation below me. Because I'm in my mid-40s, so I'm at the very beginning of that gamification attitude of people in our in today's society. So yeah, if that makes sense.
I'm gonna change tax just a little bit to go back to something that Genevieve dropped in the chat a while ago. And we always hear about PLQs, peer-like qualities. And, I can only speak to, what I've experienced, but I think, Christina touched on this and Elsie touched on this, and maybe this is some of the rest of you. When people in a franchise, people see you as a peer, even though you haven't been officially elevated. So what, thinking about PLQs, first, what would you put on a list of PLQs? And then does thinking about a PLQs or peer-like qualities guide your behavior, make you think about doing something? I kind of think of it as my little internal check that, do I need to, it's like getting in an argument with my husband. I really can't talk to you about this right now. I'm going to, let me, ruminate on that, and I will talk to you about it tomorrow, kind of thing. So PLQs. Yes, Ailey. You're still on mute.
I think that the one that always comes up in our council is how do people treat others? And it comes up with many people. How do they treat people around them? And there's there's an old saying, and I would have to do some research to figure out how old it is, but you treat your betters as your equals as your betters, and those who are neither as, I can't figure out the right wording. It's how you treat people. Not, you don't treat them well just because they're more important than you. You treat them well because they are important. And seeing people who do good service, and we've got people who do good service, and they cannot treat other people well unless they've already got the bling or a shiny hat or whatever it is. And it's a chronic problem. I see it in over and over again. So the basic PLQ that I always look at is how do they treat people around them? That's, that's very important to me as a peer at any level, is how do people treat others? And if they're treating them well, then that's great. That's a quality to be admired.
I think the other orders feel that way too.
Yeah. Reese?
It's something that I struggle with because I can be a hothead and I have to put myself on timeout quite often. And Elsie has spent many hours listening to me rant via Facebook Messenger about one thing or another that just, is irritating me or just straight up pissed me off. I try and treat everybody the same. I have pointy hats, and if it's something that is crucial that that needs to happen like right now, I have to assess, okay, is it something, especially like if it's dinner time or something like that, it does my family's going to come first, but is it something that I can squeeze in really quick? Is this going to affect, how that particular peer views my priorities? And as much as I want to help, my wife has disabilities that I need to help her with that take precedence over everything.
As they should.
And that's something that's always in the back of my brain, though, when I leave the peer that I'm helping or talking to, like, is that peer going to think, that I am not committed to this, or, I have other priorities, or less important priorities or whatever. I mean, I'm kind of rambling at this point. So,
I think that's different than treating somebody poorly just because they don't have rank. You're not doing that. You're making the right priority by putting your family first. You have to do that. That's appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Elsie?
not a negative.
Elsie?
Reese is kind enough not to say I'm usually ranting right back at him. I think when we talk about the greater PLQs, I actually sort of look at it, say, I express them two different ways. Because I was raised in fighter culture in the West, between being raised with Heinrich and spending time on guards in Sinagua in my early years, I can actually speak peer-like virtues and chivalric virtue. I don't tend to use that way of talking about it when I'm speaking with other Pelicans, because not everybody has that base understanding, but it's useful when discussing it with fighters. What I actually think is an easier way to discuss it with Pelicans is almost talking about soft skills. There's a professionalism and living up to the role of demonstrating that you can live up to the role of being a peer that I think is actually part of what we are trying to encompass when we talk about PLQs. Is that, I would pay you to volunteer to do that job because you do it so well and you leave happy people behind you and you communicate well and all of those pieces.
Yeah. And we're all human and we're all going to have a bad day. And to me, encompassing that PLQs is, and I was in a session earlier where we talked, we have to own our behavior and not make an excuse. You know, yes, I screwed up. I forgot, or I lost my cool, and I was wrong. And I apologize for that. That was not the way that I meant to behave or act or say, or whatever the case is. I mean, we don't walk on water. And I think, to me, when I look at PLQs, that one of those that I would consider is that you take ownership of who you are. I can't be responsible for how Elsie might react to something, but I can take ownership of what I do. So, Tracy.
And yet I've been in meetings, Pelican meetings, and of course our grant level award service meetings when we're discussing peer-like qualities, and the ability for the candidate being discussed to be perfect is rather disputed by so many of the old guard in my kingdom that it becomes very frustrating. Peer-like qualities does not equal perfection. And if that person is, owning up or, doing their level best, and if something happens, life happens or whatever, that shouldn't be held against them. But unfortunately, I think in some kingdoms it is.
Well, we've got just about 10 minutes left, and I want to end with something, and it came up when we first started talking, and especially now, I think, and I'm just going to use myself as an example. I'm a teacher, and frankly, when I get home at night, the last thing I want to do is get on a virtual SCA thing. I unplug for the most part. I read a book, I go for a walk, I go to the gym, I do something because I recognize I'm missing out, and I greatly admire my friends in the SCA who are like Elsie tackling this weekend, and the people that do the Known World Entertainment Guide and all of those virtual things that are happening. But I just don't have the bandwidth for that, to engage in that. So I want to end with us sharing that what strategy or techniques, things you do to keep yourself fresh, or techniques that you share with someone, whether it's a protege or another person that you spend a lot of time with in the SCA, to keep yourself fresh, not do all the things, the helium hand effect. So just ending with, what do we do for self-care? What are some things that advice that you would share?
Well, if I could start.
Sure. Thanks, Reese.
I am very plugged in to everything, and that's just how I am. I've been working in the IT field for 30 years. I get off of work, and then I'm usually right back into another meeting, whether it be gaming, whether it be SCA, whether it be whatever. I don't get a whole lot of unplugged time. And when I do, it's usually because I'm out walking my dog. I also work on, I'm part of the Between Two Peers crew. So I work on that as well throughout the week. And then I'm usually up till 3 or 4 in the morning on Fridays after the show with people in the after show chat. So it's just part of my mentality, and I know it's not for everybody. And, I put a post out on the West Kingdom page today because I know the ESCA is frustrating for a lot of people, and there's a lot of people that need help, but they're not asking for help. And if they don't ask for help, we don't know how to help them. We can't help them. And this was in response to a peer ranting about how they couldn't get into the symposium today. So it's to me, I love hearing people that, you know, are having, you know, at least some modicum of fun with the ESCA stuff. And it gets very frustrating when somebody just comes out right and says, "Oh, I hate it. It's terrible. We shouldn't have it." I'm like, well, you know, there's a bunch of us that actually do need it because it's what's keeping us going through the year. But that's off topic from the question. The question was, is how do we, you know, recharge or, you know, get our spoons back. I spend a lot of time with my dogs. You know, my dogs are my rechargers, my battery chargers.
Alistair, I saw that you had your hand up, and then Christina, and then Tracy.
I think like what I do, I'm in the same boat. I teach 6 periods a day, and by 2:30 in the afternoon, I'm like, I really don't want to see this. And we host the Telenar and I are the Baronesses of Westermark, and we host a Wednesday evening, which by the way, it's open to everybody. And there are some days that I'm like, oh, do I really have to go on this meeting? And I love it once we get on and have fun talking, and that's fine. But one thing I try to do, and I found this out because I wanted to get my hands into everything, I literally focus on 2 things. I focus on my list. I mean, mine is being Baroness. Focus on the lists, which right now is not doing very much. And I'm really passionate about my weaving. So part of the things that I do is I try to go and get on my loom, even if it's for 10 minutes, and just try to weave something. And I think that helps me center things. I also listen to audiobooks when I'm doing that, so that kind of gets off that thing. So. And then Telenar has her harp.
Yep. Christina? I think you're still muted.
There it goes.
There we go.
I thought I could use my keyboard space bar, but it didn't want to do it. This is actually my first foray into doing any ESCA, partially because I'm hopefully going to step up into the chronicler's office, and I wanted to see some faces that I might interact with, and so I wouldn't seem like a stranger. I am on the computer a lot for my job. I work in higher ed supporting a vice president. So that's all I do all day is look at computer screens. And yes, the last thing I want to do is sit in front of a computer screen on the weekend or for 2 hours at night. So because I don't do Facebook, which is going to be a whole other conversation to have with the social media minister, because I think there still needs to be a presence because some people do communicate like that. And just find different ways.
May I ask a point of clarification?
Sure.
Are you going to be the Kingdom Chronicler or are you going to be the Society Chronicler?
Oh, I'm sorry, Kingdom Chronicler.
Okay, thank you.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
Not that it really makes a difference. No, you can get there, girlfriend. If I could do it, you could do it.
But I actually do play a video game now. My oldest son gives me a lot of grief about it. You know, I am also older, but I figured it was good dexterity skills for an old brain. But also finding some joy in connecting with people again, because I want to remain engaged and interested and interesting. So that's why I'm here now. So I will carve out the time to do that. I just don't want it to be every weekend where I'm online the whole day like I am at work.
Yep.
My 2 cents.
Tracy, you still have your hand up?
Yeah, I was going to say, in terms of how do you get your mojo back, I have taken breaks in the SCA, and I have recommended this to friends and to one of my proteges. If you're not happy in what you're doing, if it's become a chore, if every time you think about going to an event, you want to throw up or throw your garb out the window, then girlfriend, you need to take a break. But and it's whether it's 6 weeks or 6 months or 6 years, whatever it is, the SCA will always be here. That's my advice.
Telenor?
Yeah, I've recently heard from a certain Pelican just how ready they are to just not have to have a job every single event. So, I mean, that's not really taking a break from the SCA. It's just participating like everybody else does for a while. And I think that's really healthy too.
Right. Any other thoughts? And I think during the circuitous route we took in our conversations, we hit most of the questions that I had down were talking points that I wanted to address. And I wanted to end with that, self-care thought that I think the service more than some of the other, it's a lot easier to always, like Telenor said, always be doing something at an event. But I think we can be much more effective sometimes participating without having a job. That I think is how we can foster growth in others too, is if we set an example of balance, then it's helpful to help others see that balance, whether they're a fighter or a laurel, or that, that we have to weigh what we do against some of the other things in our life so that we don't lose the joy, the fun, and we keep moving forward. So definitions of fun can vary wildly. Yes, they can. That would be a whole other conversation. Any other closing thoughts from anybody here? I appreciated this. It was nice, one, to see familiar names and faces. And I realized, yeah, Elsie, it was just a little over a year ago, I was, down there writing Nick, and I haven't been out. This is the first time in the 39 years I've lived in Alaska that I have not gotten on an airplane and gone somewhere in over a year. So spring break. So our school district has, if we are out of state for 72 hours or less, we don't have to quarantine. So I'm flying to Seattle and seeing, literally, like, I'm flying down on Sunday and coming back home Wednesday morning. I'm gonna go see my sister and see my mother-in-law, because I told my husband, I said, I love you, but I need to see another face every once in a while.
I'm leaving because I love you.
Yeah. Well, and his work takes him out of state. I mean, he's been to Arizona twice. He's been down to Louisiana, but and I kind of have this little nice free ticket because I got COVID in December. So I'm in that 90-day window that I don't have to get a test, because I'll still, I guess, test negative. I don't know. So I just have to take the little test result that shows I can't get a negative test when I fly. So, because in Alaska, when you come back in, you have to test at the airport. So thank you, Genevieve. It was nice to hear your voice again. I did recognize your name, and it was good to see you, Reese. I'll look forward to seeing some of the rest of you at the upcoming sessions tomorrow. Thanks for this discussion. It was a breath of fresh air for me. So Elsie, do we just all start leaving the room? Is that how it works?
We can all start leaving the room. If anybody wants to stay and chat, they can. The It's Okay to Aspire to be a Pelican social hour is going to start in the main room, and I'm going to turn hosting duties over to Ula because I'm a little spent.
Yeah. And Elsie, thank you. Your scheduling, and what a great job you've done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good job, Elsie.
Thank you. Yes.
Elsie,
So I guess, Alistair, if you want to stop recording.